minutes because I know there's a lot to talk about.
Yeah, so Steve Maxwell, fun stuff. We got fun stuff to tell you, but once a surprise, and Heather won't let me say anything. But we have raised enough money to do a mailing with the state party. So I'm still begging, okay? But we're gonna do a couple of mailings.
It was over here.
Fabulous. I think that may be the first time the
Yes.
party's ever done a mailer.
I listen. That's why I was telling George. This is so exciting. This is you could feel the energy and it's palpable. And people are. Let me tell you. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm looking at the Lincoln Project. They are on it. Their ads are scathing. But anyway, we have people walking in that say, "I want one sign. Here's $50. I want one sign. Here's $100." It's crazy, but we've been able to do all kinds of good things. But you're right. This is the first time we've ever, and since I've been chair, had the resources to do a mailer. So I'm excited.
So people are starting to
Okay.
come on in. They're all in the waiting room. So
okay.
What I'm going to do is I'm going to stop sharing the slide, the intro slide here.
Okay.
So there are people that are on our Facebook page, on YouTube, also listening to this. Of course, we have our audience. That's participants that are with us in the Zoom. Of course, those in the Zoom, if you do have a question, you can always put them into the chat, as well as if you have additional questions outside of this, you can just email us at info@tarrantdemocrats.org. I am Heather Bowen.
I'm going to ask you to keep all the participants muted except for the speakers.
Yes.
They should automatically go to the chat because we don't want to get bogged down in a lot of conversation. Okay.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So if you do have any questions, email them to me at info@tarrantdemocrats.org, or you can go directly into the chat. So Deborah, did you want to speak for a few minutes and just introduce George? Or is that me? I don't know if she heard me. Deborah?
She's muted.
So she might be muted, but I think she's looking at another screen. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to actually introduce George Hornedo. He is our regional Democratic Party voter protection team. I've been in contact with him. So for like a few weeks, you might have remembered on another town hall, we had Rose Clouston. She is the director over the Texas Democratic Party's voter protection. Phenomenal job that they're doing so far in ensuring that our voters, that their votes get counted. First, that they're able to vote and that their votes get counted. So, George, if you would like to speak for a few minutes to just talk a little bit about what the voter protection team is and what they plan on doing during the elections.
No, I absolutely appreciate you all having me here, and for everybody jumping on the call or watching from wherever. Obviously, this is the election of our lifetime, and we want to be able to make sure that we are protecting people's ability to vote in a safe and secure manner, and hopefully win up and down the ballot. And so there's a lot that our voter protection team, as part of the Texas Democratic Coordinated Campaign, is working on. And a big piece of that, which I want to talk about today, is poll watcher recruitment. So poll watchers are going to be the foundation of the work that we do. So we have to think about it. Every single level is a different level of problem solving, right? We want poll watchers to be, across, counties, across polling locations, to be able to make sure that no issue is keeping somebody from voting, whether it's intimidation and harassment, whether it's somebody being told, incorrect information, whether it is machines not working for whatever reason, whether it's a polling place not opening on time, whatever it is, we want these issues to be resolved on site and or communicated up the chain so that we can resolve them. And so that's why we're making the big push to ask people to sign up for shifts during both early voting and or election day. And so I will drop information into the chat so you have the links in order to do that. Once you sign up for a given shift, you will then receive access to a required online on-demand poll watcher training. And that will hopefully provide all the information that you need to have a better sense of what it means to be a poll watcher, the sorts of issues that you may encounter, how to go about solving them, how to communicate that issue up to your boiler room captain, everything that you're going to need to know. I will also include a link to sign up for one of our 15 Q&A sessions that prospective poll watchers can also jump on to ask any additional questions that they may have. And so it's a really foundational piece that we're building up, not just in Texas but in battleground states across the country, because knowing that this may be contentious in various ways, knowing that there may be untoward actions happening from others, we need to make sure that we have the receipts. And so any issue that's happening at any polling location in any county across the state or across the country, we want to make sure that we're tracking this so that if it rises to that level, we're able to point out everything that was happening, how we tried to resolve it, how we did resolve it, how we were not able to resolve it, what these issues were. And that starts with having a strong support group of poll watchers that are there to support voters, make it easier for them to vote, and to communicate these things up the chain. So that's the poll watcher pitch. And if there are any specific questions, I'm happy to answer to the best of my knowledge. And otherwise, I'll drop this information as well as the contact info for myself in case you want to reach out afterwards. But also I want to direct everybody's attention as well to our hotline that voters are going to be able to call into, not just now, and through early voting, but on election day as well. And then also to mytexasvotes.com, which is a very helpful resource that we have up to answer a lot of voting related questions and concerns. So thank you, everybody.
Thanks, George. I know you did not, I don't know if you mentioned this already or not, but a quick question. So the voter protection team, is that affiliated with Stacey Abrams' organization, or, or how, I know originally Rose had said that there was a grant from that organization. Is that how the voter protection team got started?
No. So it's, I think that helped in the ability for the party to have budget to have more hires, right? But no, this is part of the Texas Democratic Coordinated Campaign, right? So this is Biden on down. So Rose, for example, has kind of many bosses, right? Not just within the Texas Democratic Party, not just the Texas State Director for Biden, not just the Texas Coordinated Campaign Director, but then also the national regional voter protection desk out of Biden HQ. So it's one of those things where we're all speaking from the same playbook. We're all working from the same page. So to the extent that folks get confused when you're getting some email about something happening in a county, some text message from the Biden campaign, it's all the same, right? And so it's all funneling into this same process. And Fair Fight, obviously is involved in the work that they're doing nationally. So as they're getting people in their email list or through text banks or things like that, that's funneling into lists that we have that as a team we have been phone banking through, people that come to us from Biden realm, people that come to us from Fair Fight realm, people that based off different propensity scores of being a Democrat or having volunteered before, or being from whatever counties, however trying to put our time in terms of, phone banking to bring in volunteers. It's coming from a range of places, but it's all towards the same goal and the same operation.
Mm-hmm. And you might have already mentioned this, but as far as the poll watchers, how many do we need in Tarrant County? What are we shooting for?
Let me pull up the exact number just a second. So generally across early voting, and election day, our goal is 185. That is inclusive of a natural flake rate that happens, and we're right around there. And we're not quite there yet, but we're pretty close. So if y'all can sign up, that'd be great. We're doing much better than a lot of other places, so we're not concerned or anything like that. We're in a great place. And then we only just a couple days ago pushed out to our universe of folks that have signed up across the state to be a poll watcher, the links that I put in the chat where they can sign up for an actual shift. So whereas before we're saying we're getting people to say, yes, I want to be a poll watcher. Now we're at the place where it's becoming a reality. Like you are signing up for a specific shift, at a given time on a given day, for early voting or on election day. And already we've had, about, 90 folks within Tarrant County, sign up for shifts during early voting. And so that's one of those things that as we, are just a few days away here from early voting beginning, we're going to be, giving out assignments, based off when people are signing up. We're going to be confirming those folks, that sign up. We are going to make sure that everybody's actually going through the poll watcher training. We're going to ask folks that sign up for one day, will you sign up again, right? So we're going to keep going to that well. We're going to reshift folks based off needs. And we're going to make sure that we are staffed up to the extent that we need to be, and that, everybody that signs up gets put to work, so that we're able to support voters in the best way possible.
So, and then just one more question that I had, how are poll watchers? I know that there's some protocols, from the elections office regarding election workers and, during COVID, staying safe. What if a lot of our poll workers, were high risk. And so they did not want to work on election day because they're in close proximity. Is it possible to volunteer as a poll watcher? What kind of safety precautions will our poll watchers get, for COVID? Or is there a way that maybe they can just observe from the outside? What kind of different types of safety precautions and roles and responsibilities will poll watchers have?
Yeah, so we're asking, we have distribution centers that will be available for folks to pick up, whether it's a little button for a credential to say that you're a poll watcher so people understand, that you're playing that role. We're going to, provide PPE for those that want to need it. And then we're going to have FAQs to the extent that folks don't want to go and take that extra step to go to a distribution center. That's fine. You can go without the button. You can provide your own PPE. You can print out the FAQ doc, on your own at home, but we are making that available. So that is something that, will be the case with our poll watchers, and that we're asking out of everybody. We need poll watchers inside, certainly, and that is part of the program and central to the program. But we're also going to be putting poll watchers on the outside, right? Because there are issues that are happening on the outside, or that could happen on the outside, that aren't necessarily indoors. And so to the extent that we slot someone to be a poll watcher, and you in particularly wanted to be outside, then let us know. And we're going to have that sort of piece built in. So if you're slotted for a location that, for whatever reason, it doesn't work, or if you're slotted, inside and that doesn't work, we're going to say, if there are any issues, email us back at, voting at, txdemocrats.org, and we can get all that resolved. But, step 1, 2, 3, et cetera, is actually signing up at the links provided to be a poll watcher, either during early voting, or ideally both during early voting and election day. And go through the poll watcher training that you're then going to receive once you sign up at that link. And then assignments are actually doled out, usually no more than a couple of days in advance, because we're constantly looking at what the needs are, and shifts and everything.
Yeah, and I noticed there was a question in the chat really quickly, like the roles, sort of just quickly, what the role is of a poll watcher versus a poll greeter.
So, okay, a few things. So there are poll workers, right?
Yep.
That is nonpartisan, that is hired, a paid thing by the elections office. That's what that is. Poll watchers, obviously by virtue of coming through, the Democratic Coordinated Campaign, through Tarrant Dems, et cetera, that is a partisan thing. It is, volunteer, and the general purpose is to be on site at a polling location troubleshooting. So you're not really, certainly not on the inside, speaking to voters or anything like that. The first thing when you get there is you want to be able to build a rapport with, the presiding judge, the alternate judge, the poll workers, make yourself known as a poll watcher that's there, try and build that rapport. And, a lot of what you're going to be doing is, as people are checking in, you're going to, have a little bit of, space and everything, but you want to get a sense of what's going on so that if incorrect information is being given, that you find ways to correct that. If you're seeing something that's happening, that needs to be resolved, either find the way to resolve it, communicate it up the chain to your boiler room captain, who can then communicate it to the folks above, that person should that be necessary, right? So there are constantly different levels of problem solving with different tools available to each different sort of person, right? Going up to the statewide level, going up to the national level, et cetera. So that's kind of what that looks like, and poll watchers are the foundation of that. And so it's just kind of being generally our eyes and ears on the ground at a given location.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. George, I don't know. Does anybody else have any other questions regarding poll watchers? So if you are in the chat, George did post the links if you wanted to become a poll watcher. It's going to be a very important function. The other thing, though, is the voter assistance hotline. If you or somebody that has an issue with voting, they can actually call and report it to 844-TX-VOTES or 844-898-6837. George, thank you very, very much. If nobody has any other questions, I know you've got to jump.
Or one last thing, because I realized that I didn't fully touch. So the poll watcher versus poll greeter part, right? So Heather and I have talked a bit about this, and some of you on this call, maybe signed up as poll greeters or doing that. So obviously poll greeters, you all have the program that you're running, and that is great, and that makes a lot of sense. What we would love to be the case is for poll greeters to go through our poll watcher training, so that even though you're there and you're greeting folks and you're doing whatever is part of that process, you're also a helpful set of eyes and ears on the ground, right? So in the same sort of way that's additional capacity that's there to kind of help communicate things up, we want you all to be trained on kind of what that process looks like. So by no means, if you're acting as a poll greeter, not do that, right? But if possible, we'd love for you to still sign up through one of those early voting or election day links, and you will have gone through the same process and understand it, and be able to kind of serve that dual function. And that's something that works, because poll greeters, if that's something that's inherently outside of a polling place and location, and to welcome somebody, there's no electioneering or anything wrong with that. So it is one of those circumstances where you're able to kind of act as both. So
awesome. And I think Nancy or Lynn, did you have a question? I'm going to unmute you. Or
yes, I went to the links, and I was on your Tuesday state party one also, and went to there and wanted to find out so I could disseminate information. So I'm helping to get poll watchers, and I want to tell people what this training is about. But it didn't have the training. I'd had to sign up for a shift before I could find out what it's involving. Is that correct? I have to sign up for a shift before I can get to the training?
So the email that went out to people that had already told us that they wanted to be a poll watcher. So these were folks that, whether through phone banking, whether through our TDP links, whether through the Biden campaign, text program, whatever it is, the idea is that they already knew, at least to some level, that poll watching, in short, is being our eyes and ears on the ground, being a problem solver, etc. So that is why maybe there wasn't that level, of information, provided. So that's helpful. Those are the links that we're trying to push out at this point, as opposed to the old, TDP, voter protection, volunteer, because now we're at the kind of put up or shut up, sort of section of it, where it's like, okay, you said that you're interested in, now sign up for a specific shift, right? So hopefully this information is helpful in terms of communicating what it means to be a poll watcher. That specifically went out to people that had already had an understanding, so that may be why.
Okay, thanks for your explanation. It was a lot of time for not much of anything, because our question is basically,
How do we get the training?
how, if we're not going to, let me just do it this way. We're not going to be here for the election. We're going to be out of town. So, but our job right now, and what we've been doing for several weeks now, is trying to help you find poll watchers. And if we can't explain to them about the training, then we're lacking information that we need that might help us be able to recruit people to do this job. And if we can't get into the training unless we sign up for a shift, then that's an impediment for us to know what the training is about in order to tell people what they need to know. We're not saying that we're going to tell them what it says as opposed to them going to the training. We're just trying to recruit them to go do the training.
So Lynn and George, do you want me to connect you with Lynn and Nancy? I can do that.
Yeah, I can forward you the same email that I've pushed out to everybody. Honestly, there's not much information to provide, because we can't do a 90-minute training in email. We can't do a 90-minute training, in just one of these calls. That's to get people's general interest, right? And so, in short,
I can't hear you very well.
You faded away. Speak louder.
Oh, okay.
So what you're telling us is no, you have to sign up for a shift if you want to get the training. Is that what you're telling us?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, thanks.
Okay.
And then what we can do, and that way you guys can have a conversation, because what you're looking for is you want to recruit and get an understanding, so you can have a higher level, a deeper level conversation than what this call is for.
Yes.
I think that would be more helpful.
Yep.
Yeah, we'll connect you all.
All right.
Thank you for the question, though.
Thank you, everybody.
Okay, George. I don't know if there's any other questions, because I know we got a lot to cover,
George,
and I know you've got to
go to
jump
your
some.
call. We got to move on. Go. Thank you. Okay.
Thanks, George. All right. So, our guest of the evening is Steve Maxwell. Deborah, I don't know if you wanted to introduce Steve, but I'm going to try my best. Deborah, are you there?
I'm here. So, okay, Steve needs no introduction. He really doesn't.
No.
And so Steve Maxwell has to be, he is a super lawyer. And anybody who knows him knows he is also an incredibly dedicated Democrat. And it was my good fortune to come after him as chair of the Tarrant County Democratic Party. And so he tried to get away, but we are joined at the hip. I still view him as one of the foremost authorities on election law in Texas. And so he always heads our voter protection team. And so it is with a great deal of excitement that Steve agreed to join us tonight. And Lynn, you're right. He's the infamous, honorable Steve Maxwell. Welcome, Steve.
Unmute. Okay. Hopefully you can hear me now. First of all, everybody, thank you for joining this tonight. I'm going to start out by stating what you've already heard, but I think it's worth emphasizing. This election will be the most important election of your lifetime, and indeed, probably the most important election since the one of 1860. I don't think I'm overstating it to say that 4 more years of the very stable genius may do damage to this democracy that we can never recover from. So if you're on this call tonight, it's because you have already been given thought to what you will be doing many years from now when a child or a grandchild comes to you and says, "Grandma, what did you do back in that election of 2020 when that orange-haired guy tried to ruin our country?" And you can either say, "Well, I didn't do anything because I knew it was going to be taken care of and other people were going to step up to help." Or you can say, I went to war and I did everything that I possibly could to make sure that we won that election. And that's what we're going to be talking about in about 4 weeks. So there's two things that I wanted to cover tonight. One of them is the obvious one. If you're here, you're already interested in serving as a poll watcher. What George said a little while ago is incredible, because I'm going to tell you, we already have more than 4 times as many poll watchers signed up than we have ever had before. Generally, all we have been able to do is get enough people to cover our most important polls where we felt like we may have problems. Before we're all said and done here, we're going to have poll watchers in every single polling location in Tarrant County all day long. So, assignment number 1, if you have not signed up to be a poll watcher, please do so. Assignment number 2, if you know somebody who would like to be a poll watcher, send them the information that George is providing to you, because it will be a very rewarding job in the end. Although, and part 2 of what I want to talk about tonight is to give you some practical observations of what you could expect if you're going to do this job. I've been involved in voter protection since the Kerry Edwards campaign. And I think I have probably seen just about every single scenario that can come along that a poll watcher has to deal with. I think before we go much farther down the road, we're going to be providing everybody with a list of things that they can expect and suggestions on how they can be dealt with. And that's exactly what the training is going to deal with as well. But here are a couple of observations that I hope will then lead into, I'm here because I was hoping there would be people who would ask me questions about things. We can kind of give you a head start on what you can expect. First of all, the job's going to be a little easier than I think we have normally seen, because everybody who knows something about this is telling me they expect that 75% of the voters will vote before Election Day. So we may not have the turnout on Election Day that we usually do, which will make things a lot easier. Let's hope that's true. Secondly, I will also tell you this. We have done a voter protection boiler room just about every election since I was county chair. And we have a group of lawyers come into my conference room and sit around a table waiting for the call that comes that they can go out to someplace and put out a fire. And those calls never come. It really is pretty boring most of the time, but you know what? When this is all over, I would rather say, yeah, we didn't get a single call that we had to respond to, rather than we got calls and we didn't know what to do with them. The kind of calls that you get most often are, I went to my polling location and I wasn't on the list. And you know what that usually turns out to be? You're in the wrong polling location. That's not a problem this year, because they passed a law that says you can now vote in any of the locations. So we don't have to deal with the most obvious, most usual complaint that we get. The second most frequent complaint we get, and every election, it's the same thing. Somebody will call up and say, well, the candidate I wanted to vote for was not on my ballot. They left him or her off. Generally, it's like this. People show up and they will call me and say, Beverly Powell's not on my ballot. They gave me the wrong ballot. They kept her off. Well, I have to say, well, Beverly Powell's not up this time. She wasn't supposed to be on the ballot. Most of the time when that happens, it's because the candidate they were looking for isn't even there. Or the candidate was there and they just sailed right past it when they went through their ballot. Now, I will tell you, one time it actually was true. The election judge had handed the voter the wrong ballot, and we had to go through the process of straightening that out. So yeah, it can happen. And then, of course, there's a situation where somebody will call and say, well, I tried to vote and I took what I thought was the proper ID and they wouldn't let me vote. That's the one I think we're most ready for. And everybody will be armed with the list of things that people can bring with them if they don't have a Texas driver's license that will allow them to vote. Now, those are the things that we most often deal with. Here are some of the little things, though, that might interest you that are unique. They're the ones where candidates, overzealous candidates, are out there passing out food and drink to voters as they come in. Technically, folks, that's illegal. But you know what? It's really, you have to make a judgment call sometimes. And this is the election judge's call. Some candidates have people set up on a table well outside the 100-foot marker with candy on the table. Is it illegal to pass out that candy? I don't know, but everybody will do it. And I don't think that you're going to ruffle any feathers if there's somebody out there passing out candy and you don't go over there and break it up. People who wear t-shirts with campaign slogans or candidates' names on them, that's a no-no. But that's the election judge's job when they come in to tell them you can't come into the polling location if you have the name of a candidate and you're trying to do electioneering for that candidate. I have a lot of other different things that we have experienced over the last several years. So I think at this point, I'll just open it up. Does anybody have any questions about what we're going to be doing or how we're going to handle certain situations?
So Steve, I know the one question a lot of people have are relates to Trump and what they consider, Trump's army, right? So the Republicans are recruiting a lot of poll watchers to, and just, which poll watching is great. Both parties can do it. Definitely understand the need for it. But I guess the concern that some people that are not authorized poll watchers decide to show up at the polls with AR-15s or to just generally, cause intimidation or havoc. Like, what can a voter do or an election worker do in some of these kinds of cases?
That's an excellent question. And that is the single greatest concern that I think we have for this upcoming election. I mean, you can't ignore it when the FBI issues a warning saying there may be trouble at polling locations for this election, and the Proud Boys are going to try to show up and demonstrate why they're proud. So here's the deal. It is not the job of our poll watchers to confront these nuts. You just simply cannot do it. It's the election judge's job to do that. And the election judge is going to have several different remedies. It's probably not particularly wise for the election judge to confront those people himself or herself. So that's why we've got the hotline set up. That's why we're going to have information for notifying the police to come out, because anybody who shows up with a gun or even trying threatening or intimidation tactics is violating federal and state law. They can actually be arrested for that. Threatening them with arrest probably doesn't do a whole lot of good. The police showing up will do a lot of good. Here's the problem. We're not going to get any help at all in Tarrant County from our sheriff's office. I can already tell you that. I hope we're going to get help from the various police departments. And I think one of the things that we probably need to do is have a phone number for every police headquarters that we can give to the election judge, because if something like this comes up, the first thing we do is we notify the election judge, there's a problem, you need to handle this.
I think that's why it's good that we have the voter protection. But I also think common sense kind of plays a role in this. I mean, if someone's, breaking a law, obviously if it's an emergency, 911. So I hope we do that. But of course, also report it to voter protection. So does anybody out there, I'm actually looking on the live stream to see if anybody has any questions out there, or if anybody on the chat, if you have a question, you can enter it into our chat for Steve. I don't see any questions, because I think that was the biggest one, is just the concern.
So there's been a lot of talk, Steve, about poll watchers. And I know it's been a while since you've had to deal with poll watchers, but I think John Schleter has some questions on there. I think there are a couple of questions. So can you kind of talk through, and I know what Lynn and Nancy are saying, are there any rules around poll watchers that they need to know so they can make a decision on whether they want to sign up?
Well, I think that the questions that I'm most frequently asked are more along the lines of what Heather talked about a little earlier, the health and COVID related issues. The advantage of being a poll watcher is you're going to be able to maintain your distance from pretty much everybody here. I have a really bad pet peeve with the COVID instructions that the Secretary of State has released for both voters and for everybody involved in the election process. And the reason I'm so upset about this is because the Secretary of State is not requiring that people wear masks when they go in to vote. I think that should be an absolute requirement. But if you're a poll watcher, you're going to be able to stay outside and pretty well stay away from any of the exposure that's going to come along. But then beyond the precautions you take for your health, the question that we are asked most often is, what do we do if there really is a troublemaker out there causing a problem? And that's what I said a little bit earlier. My first choice is tell the election judge that there's something going on, because that is that person's job to rule that polling place and make sure nothing illegal is happening. But you know what? That's easier said than done. If there's a crowd and people are voting, the election judge may not be able to get up and go out and take care of whatever's going on outside. That's why your second choice is you call the hotline. The hotline will then call somebody in one of the boiler rooms. They can go out and they can deal with this. They can make the necessary calls, including, if necessary, a call to a U.S. Marshal, if that's the only way that you can deal with somebody who's trying to intimidate voters. So at the end of the day, we're not going to ask you to get out there and get in a fight. We're not going to ask you to put yourself in the zone of danger, but we are going to ask you that if you are observing something that is wrong like that, and you're going to know if it's wrong, believe me, that you call the hotline, that you notify the election judge, that you make sure the Tarrant County Democratic Party is aware something bad is going on.
Thanks, Steve. And I see Phil Nichols had a question in the chat saying, please, just explain a little further why the Sheriff's Department may or may not respond to an incident versus local police.
The Sheriff's Office has already shown their colors, and they are strongly Republican. And if they get a call from a Democratic poll watcher, they're not going to put it on high priority. And in fact, in years past, even the very seldom times that we've had to call the police never put these things on very high priority, but there's always been a reason for that. Just as in my experience, when they finally show up to look and see what the complaint is all about, there was nothing to form the basis of the complaint to begin with. It was something that was overblown or misunderstood. So I'm just telling you, my experience is law enforcement shows up reluctantly.
That actually makes sense. I did kind of want to get your opinion. There have been a lot of lawsuits, on the going all the way up to the Supreme Court regarding. I know we were talking about elections and what people may expect when they go in to vote, but I don't know if you had any opinions or some information regarding vote by mail. And especially the different court cases of being able to send out applications and drop off locations and things like that. What is your perspective, or what are you hearing on the ground with regards to vote by mail in Texas?
Okay, well, that's a good question. And of course, every single state is going to have different rules for that. We're very fortunate in Tarrant County. We have a very capable and a very cooperative elections administrator. And I've already had several lengthy conversations with Hyder Garcia about this. He recognizes the potential problems, and I was real pleased that he didn't just wave his hand off and say, this is no big deal. It is a big deal. And people are doing their very best to put obstacles in the way of people who want to vote by mail. But the bottom line is that the vast majority of people who want to vote by mail have been able to do that. More than 57,000 vote by mail ballots have already been mailed out. And we've been checking around to people over 65 just to see if they're getting theirs, and they are. So we're not experiencing a problem yet in Tarrant County. If we're going to experience a problem, it's this. If a voter follows the directives of a postcard sent out by the United States Postal Service a few weeks ago and waits until October, I think it said 15th, to request their application to vote by mail, they're not going to make it in time, because as you get closer to that November 3rd date, the mail is going to get slower and slower. You've got to mail in your application. It's got to be processed by the Elections Administration Office. It then is mailed back to the voter. The voter has to fill it out and then mail it back again. And I'm telling you, and even Hyder Garcia agreed with this, somebody who waits to the last minute is running a real risk their vote will not be counted. So here's what we're telling everybody. If you can at all possibly vote in person, because we've got the luxury of 3 weeks of early voting, please do that. If you just can't do it, or your state of health is such that you just don't want to go into a building to do that, I understand. Get your mail-in ballot sent in immediately. Don't take the chance that it's going to be hung up in the mail. I think from a practical perspective, I'm far more worried about a November 4th challenge from the Justice Department that all vote-in ballots should be declared invalid than I am about the mail-in ballots not being counted.
Okay. Is and we never know. The Justice Department has said a lot of crazy things, but saying that it's interesting, because I would hope that they wouldn't do that on November 4th, but you never know. It's interesting that you brought that up, and I don't know if anybody on about that, and I don't know if you have insight on this, but let's say Trump decides, I'm not going to leave. Like, do you know what kind of options there would be? If, say, for instance, the popular vote, the electoral vote is pretty convincing, but he chooses not to leave. I'm just kind of curious, like, what the next steps would be to get him out of there.
Well, I tell you what, that is the subject of a complete program in itself, because there are many, many things that can happen. Some of them are not very good. Some of them are comical. Some of them are things we don't have to worry about. I'm telling you, what my hope is that voter turnout is so high and the margin of victory is convincing enough that he realizes this is a losing battle. I'm not going to be at all surprised if someday, about a week before January 20th, when he realizes it's just not going to work, he resigns, Pence becomes president for a week, and then pardons Trump. I think that's his biggest fear, that he's going to get indicted, and frankly, he deserves it.
So there's a question actually coming from Facebook. What happened, and this is regarding vote by mail, what happens when someone receives their vote by mail ballot, but they don't send it in, or they want to vote in person? Like, what's that process?
That's an excellent question. So here's the deal on that. If you send in your application for a vote by mail ballot, scenario number one, you never get it. You show up at either early voting or on voting day. You go up to the election judge, you check in, and you say, I requested a mail-in ballot. I never got it. They will run a check and see, because they will be able to tell at that point if one had been mailed out to you. And that way they can take the necessary steps to make sure you're not casting two separate votes. So they then would invalidate any mail-in ballot that may have been sent out to you, even though you never got it, and allow you to vote in person. Scenario number two, you requested a mail-in ballot, it was returned to you, and you got it. And then you thought, well, I heard what Steve Maxwell said, and he said, they may not get my ballot in time to count it. I'm going to go vote in person anyway. And you can do that. And you show up, and again, you must take your mail-in ballot with you when you do that, and you turn it in to the election judge when you show up at your polling location, and they will then give you a ballot to mark right there at that spot. Scenario number three is that you're and I've just lost my train of thought, because I've given this talk before. There's three things that you have to watch for with the mail-in ballot. I'll think of it in a minute. Anyway, those two, the scenarios I just gave you are the ones that are most likely.
So Steve, you just got a question on Facebook. There are a lot of them on Facebook, but Byron Preston, who's one of our precinct chairs, says, what if someone comes in wearing a Black Lives Matter t-shirt and you're a poll watcher?
That's going to be a judgment call. A poll watcher doesn't have the authority to tell anybody, take that shirt off, even if they come in with a Trump t-shirt. They can say, you know, sir, that shirt is probably illegal, but that's about as far as you can go. That's the election judge's job to make the call on whether or not the shirt is illegal. A Black Lives Matter t-shirt may be a political statement. I don't know. I'm going to say it's probably a judgment call by that election worker, and people need to be prepared to be turned away, even if they think what they're doing is a legitimate First Amendment right.
Okay.
So Lynn brought up something in the chat regarding the signature piece. I know that there was a recent court case, I believe in Texas, regarding, I don't know if it was Texas or nationwide, regarding your vote by mail ballot and about signatures. Do the signatures have to match on the application, the original application and the ballot? And what happens if a voter, you know, over the years, sometimes because of a disability or some other reason, their signatures don't match?
Steve,
Is there a process
can I
for that?
respond to that? Can
Yeah.
I respond to that? Because Kat Kano was on a call and they did it. So guys, in the primary election, we lost 22 ballots. If a signature, just say somebody had a stroke and a signature, you know, it doesn't look like their signature, they can go back for several years and pull the signatures and try to compare them. If there's any way that they can match that, we have 39 people on the ballot board and they are all super sharp and their goal is not to reject the ballot. I cannot tell you if this happens in every county. I would like to believe it does, but in Tarrant County, our team's goal, and Steve Maxwell knows because he started this, is to not reject the ballot. So we reject very few ballots, and very few of them, I mean, very few of them get kicked out for signatures. I'm just going to be honest with you.
Now, I just remembered the third scenario that I wanted to tell you about with mail-in ballots, and that is where you have received your mail-in ballot from the Elections Administration Office, and you decide, I don't trust the mail, and I want to go ahead and hand deliver my mail-in ballot because I don't want to go into a polling location either. You probably read about this in the paper. Governor Abbott decided I'm only going to allow there to be one spot in every county where you can drop off your mail-in ballot. And that one spot in Tarrant County is the Elections Administration Office at 2700 Premier Street. But Hyder's aware of the inconvenience of this. He's got people set up. I think he told me they've got 3 boxes set up there at the location so that there shouldn't be long lines of people pulling in. You pull in, you hand your vote by mail ballot to the person, and you get to watch them actually put it in the box. So you verify that your ballot is going to be counted.
And Steve, just in keeping with that, we already sat down and had talked with Hyder about opening other locations. And he explained the law, how he interpreted. And so, because we were trying to have a drop-off location in Arlington, one on the Southwest. But after looking at what he explained and us going back, we did not go down the road that Houston did and some of the other locations. As a result, I realized that it might be inconvenient for some people to drive to 2700 Premier, but we have been consistently giving them the same information. And so they are turning in a lot of ballots. And I know we wish we had more, but I am glad that we didn't have to close down sites and confuse voters.
Awesome. I did have there's a question, and I think John Schlueter had it from Facebook. Like Bud Kennedy's ballot, mail-in ballot got rejected, I believe, due to signature. So what would have been Bud Kennedy's options if, say, for instance, your mail-in ballot got rejected because of signature?
So Steve, I'm gonna let you answer that, but remember he voted in the Republican primary, so we didn't kick it out. Okay,
Just
we
saying.
did not. Okay, go ahead, Steve.
I actually talked to him about that just a couple of weeks ago, and I gave him a really hard time about it. And he fessed up. He said it was my fault, and there was an irregularity with his signature. But to answer your question, it's a practical question. If you're fortunate enough that you find out your mail-in ballot has been rejected, and you're not likely to find that out until it's too late, then the records are going to show that you have not cast that ballot because it wasn't recorded. So then you can go through the process I've just talked about of showing up in person, either at early voting or on election day, and casting your vote. But again, it's a practical question. Learning that they have rejected your mail-in vote is going to be something that you may find out early enough to do that. But you know what? You may not find it out until it's too late.
Yeah, and I'm not sure that the elections office proactively notifies people if they're right. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. I have a question in the chat from Jasmine. Should poll watchers advise voters that are wearing like MAGA hats, shirts, whatever, that they're not allowed within a certain amount of feet of the polling location?
Yes, 100-foot boundary for that. And you have to do it in a nice way, because again, I can't emphasize enough, enforcing state and federal law on things like that is really the election judge's job. But I see very little harm in a poll watcher who somebody walk into the election area with a MAGA hat saying, "Sir, I'm sorry, but you can't come within 100 feet of the polling location with that hat on." And if they ignore you, it then becomes the election judge's job to take it from there.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. So I'm checking for any more questions. I know we're at the almost 6:50 time period. So if there's no other questions, oh, actually, Phil Nichols has a question in the chat. What happens? Yeah, what happens if there's an election judge that doesn't take action? For instance, in the primary runoff, we saw some election judges that are supposed to be wearing masks, election workers, and they just weren't. So what happens if an election judge isn't following the rules?
That is such a good question, because you're going to have election judges in every election who don't follow the rules. And this one in particular, an election judge who doesn't wear a mask isn't violating any rules because the Secretary of State is not requiring it, which baffles me. But
okay, but our election judges are, Steve, because we, through Tarrant County elections, we require that they wear a mask and or a shield. I can't remember if it's both, but they get shields and masks. What Hyder's position is that we're paying you to work an election, and our requirement is that you have to wear a mask. It's the voter who can come in without a mask.
I think that if a voter, there's not an easy answer to that. Yeah. But again, you've got to rely on an election judge to do what you hope is the right thing there. But I'm going to tell you what, that issue right there is the one that you're going to see more than anything else on November 3rd. Voters coming in without a mask. And what you can do about it is complain to the elections judge and hope that you've got somebody who is strong enough to say, you're going to have to wear a mask if you come in here. Remember, the election judge probably has the power to set that rule for their own polling location. Now, there'll be other times an election judge, there's something clearly wrong going on. Most of the time, it's somebody comes in with the proper kind of ID, and the election judge, for whatever reason, wants to turn that voter away. And if that voter comes out and tells you, I couldn't cast my ballot because the election judge wouldn't let me, you find out what the problem is, and then you call the hotline or you call the party, because we can take care of that.
Yeah. So, Steve, I don't want to let anybody off this call without resolving this on the mask, and you and I probably need to talk. It is Haida Garcia's position that in the state of Texas election code, that the ruling says you can't do anything to impede a person from voting. And I'll have to go back and look at the language. And in his opinion, that means you cannot make a voter wear a mask. We had talked in the Elections Commission meeting about even having separate areas for people who didn't have masks. And we were told by the DA's office that you couldn't do that because that's discriminatory. Because if I had 10 over here for people wearing masks and only 3 over here for people not wearing masks, that was a disparate treatment. So we could talk about it later, but I don't want people to get off this call thinking they can tell a voter they have to put on a mask when I know Hyder's position is that the voter doesn't. The workers have to wear masks, but not the voter.
Well, I'm not surprised at all to hear that, Deborah,
Yeah.
because the instructions coming from the top aren't very clear.
No, I agree. And so what I'd like to believe, now you're always going to have some wacko without a mask. That just goes without saying. What I would like to believe is that more people are going to wear masks than not. Even Republicans have started to wear masks, but you're going to have some crazies without them.
Go ahead, Lynn.
Oh, Deborah, Lynn and Nancy have a question.
Okay, Steve, I'm very curious because when I went through poll watcher training prior to this, okay, and the rules may have changed for all I know, but I was under the impression that poll watchers are there to simply watch and report to the judge, that they don't get to go tell people anything.
No, you're absolutely right. What I'm saying is that if you want to make a friendly suggestion, if somebody is inside the 100-foot line, or whatever, I don't see any reason why a poll watcher shouldn't be able to do that. Do you have any power
Outside
to
the
tell
line?
them?
No. Okay, outside the line, yeah. But I mean, for the poll watcher duties, they're pretty restricted, I think, from talking to anyone except the judge.
That's correct. It's the judge's job to enforce these rules, but
Okay.
it's the poll watcher's job to bring them to the attention of the judge.
Right. And not talk to anybody in particular, right? So they have to talk to the judge only, is my understanding.
Yeah, that is technically absolutely correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and just to sort of clarify, I think, as we talk about the roles of the poll watchers, the poll greeters, Lynn, you're talking about like what we're familiar with, the poll watchers that get appointed by parties and campaigns, and they're inside of that polling location, observing the handling of the elections. Kind of like what we're having is we have poll watchers now that will be outside. So the Texas Democratic Party has to officially, or they have their own training and they're appointing them. And so while we'll have poll watchers inside, because that role is very important, we're also having poll watchers on the outside just to sort of observe. They'll go from location to location to just make sure that, they monitor the line, make sure there's no issues, things like that. And I think, my opinion, this election, you have a lot more people willing to volunteer, and hopefully you'll have so much turnout that function is going to be very critical, as we talk about managing the lines, because even the lines themselves, 6 feet, people have to maintain 6 feet of distance, just all kinds of things. So
okay. That's okay as far as it goes. But what I'm saying here is you don't have 2 separate rules for poll watchers. You have one set of rules for poll watchers. Either they talk to the judge or they don't talk to the judge. Yeah, how do you get around that?
Lynn, it's the poll watcher's job to bring problems to the attention of the election judge. But what we're saying is there's going to be encounters, friendly ones likely, outside that 100-foot line. That's what poll watchers are there for. They're there to make it known to voters. If you have a problem, you're told you can't vote, come back out here and tell me about it. Maybe we can help.
I see a real problem here. And we can talk about it later if you want to, Steve, but I see a real problem.
Yeah, I think it's more, it's kind of, it'll be a judgment call, because sometimes the voters coming in, they just unwittingly may not know. And so being able, like what Steve said, just something very friendly, because what happens is they go in and then they go all the way up to the front of the line, and then someone tells them, oh, you can't do that. I think they might be a little perturbed if that happens. So kind of look at the role on the outside as preventing them from having to stand in that long line, only to have to either turn their shirt inside out or something like that. So
I understand. I totally understand when you're talking about outside the 100-yard line. Okay. But you can have two sets of rules for the poll watchers. Poll greeters now, okay, can do anything they want. They have no restrictions on the outside.
In a way, because you can't electioneer within 100 feet, that kind of stuff.
But when you're talking about inside that 100 feet line, okay, you can't have two sets of rules. And I'm not a rules person. I like breaking rules.
So, Lynn, I know for the poll watchers outside, you're going to talk to,
Heather,
go ahead, Deborah.
That's why we're going. George dropped the links in the chat. That is why, please go on. There is one for to sign up for a training. I cannot imagine that it's going to be more than a couple of hours. I think if you go there, you will get your questions answered by the state. There's also a Q&A session on poll watching that you can click on that link and sign up for it. And so I think since the state is handling this for us, we've been sending everybody to the state so everybody would get the same kind of message. I would advise everybody to go in there and click on that link. I'm going to go to one of the trainings just so I can hear it too.
Yeah, I pasted it again into the chat. So we just have like 2 minutes left. So I think we can close. Steve, I don't know if you have any last minute comments to add before we end the town hall.
Well, I don't, only to thank everybody for their interest in this. And I've got a lot of optimism that this is going to be a good election for us.
Thank you very much for joining us. Deborah, do you have any last minute comments?
No, not a thing. I'm just excited. And just so you all know, so Steve, we've been doing some early crunching. Our people are getting out to vote. We're excited. And so we're doing well on vote by mail, I believe. And I think next week is going to be a big week for us.
Right.
Awesome. So just want to let everybody know, thank you so much for joining us for this virtual town hall event. Thank you very much, Steve Maxwell, for all of the information. I know some of it is constantly changing sometimes as we head towards the early vote period that starts next week, Tuesday, October 13th. In the chat, as well as if you're on live stream, in the comments, you're going to see links to if you want to become a poll watcher, as well as some of the Q&A sessions and training sessions to sort of empower yourself with a lot more information on voting rights, and if you're a poll watcher, how to report incidences. So with that, appreciate everybody for coming. It's now 7 o'clock. If you have any questions for me, my name's Heather Buen. I am the communications chair for Tarrant County Democratic Party. Feel free to send an email over to info@tarrantdemocrats.org, and we'll try to answer your questions. So just a hearty goodbye, everybody. Thank you very much for joining, and we will see you next time.